Tonight, the surge in support for the far right across Europe that's led to a huge political gamble. After calling snap elections, Emmanuel Macron may soon have to govern alongside a populist prime minister. In Italy, in the US, in the Netherlands, even here in the UK, why is the anti-establishment message winning over voters? I'll ask best-selling author Naomi Klein. Also coming up, the president's son who could face up to 25 years in prison. Hunter Biden is accused of illegally buying a gun while addicted to crack. We'll be live outside court in Delaware, where the jury is deliberating. This evening, the UN voted in favour of a ceasefire proposal for Gaza, but what good is a symbolic show of hands when so many are still being killed? This weekend, hundreds of people were reportedly killed in Gaza in an operation which freed 4 hostages. I'll hear live from the former commander of the Israeli unit that led the mission. Plus, England's Euro squad arrive in Germany after a royal send-off. But what was Prince Louis's advice to the 3 lions? Find out on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. Some have described these European elections as a fight for the future of the continent. Now, that may sound a bit melodramatic, but the people elected to the European Parliament matter. That's because the laws they set will affect 500 million people across the continent. And tonight, it's clear that we're seeing a shift in the balance of power swing to the far right in France, in Italy and in Germany. Populist parties are on course to win just under a quarter of the votes. That will have a significant impact on policies from migration to climate change. And you may think it doesn't matter because the UK has left the EU. Well, think again. We collaborate on things like defence and supporting Ukraine. The Union is still this country's biggest trading partner. Well, tonight, we'll discuss what makes these anti-establishment parties so attractive with our correspondents in France and Germany. But first, we begin tonight with a report from our Europe correspondent Adam Parsons, which does contain some flash photography.
Emmanuel Macron was at an event to commemorate atrocities of the Second World War, a presidential duty carried out while political turmoil grows. Behind the smiles here, there is stress. Macron has dissolved Parliament and called an election a high-risk gamble after his party was drubbed in European elections. Beaten by Rassemblement National, the far-right party of Marine Le Pen, today in Paris to launch her party's plans for the campaign ahead. She later appeared on French television to set out her appeal to the voters.
We have an historic opportunity to allow the nationalist movement to put France back on track. And in order to do that, we must rally together. We must invite all patriots who are against the politics of Emmanuel Macron, who want to join us to build a solid majority.
If the parliamentary elections go their way, then this man, party president Jordan Bardella, is likely to end up as France's Prime Minister, with Le Pen aiming once again for the presidency in 3 years' time. This is Le Pen's heartland, where she comes to vote, where she and her party are adored, and where many hope to usurp Macron.
La Macronie qui a beaucoup déçu les Français parce qu'ils ont
Macron's administration has really let down the nation.
Ils ont mal exercé le pouvoir.
They've been belligerent and used their power in a bad way with so many reforms. We at the RN have given hope back to the people of France.
Incarner l'espoir pour les Français.
But it isn't just about Le Pen. Bardella is just 28, but he's helped to transform this party and to attract a huge wave of young voters like Yanis.
We can see on social media channels Jordan Bardella is reaching huge numbers. He's the president of our party, a great politician who in just a few weeks could be the prime minister. And then in 2027, why not alongside Marine Le Pen if she becomes president?
The RN is a divisive group, unapologetic and forthright. For many, that's its appeal. For others, it is troubling.
I'm scared about the future. People are unhappy, things are expensive, and there's no change. It's not like France used to be anymore.
And that sense of unease goes beyond this country. It was France that saw the greatest fallout from these European elections, but across this continent, there are a host of countries that saw surges in support for nationalist, populist and far-right political parties. In Germany, the far-right AfD celebrated into the night after taking second place, ahead of the Chancellor's battered party. While in Italy, a victory celebration for Giorgia Meloni, leading another right-wing party that has prospered. But it is France that has felt a political shockwave. This snap election is just 3 weeks away. Life here is moving fast. Adam Parsons, Sky News, NM Beaumont.
Well, even though the traditionally centre-right parties remain broadly in control, have a look at how the radical right is advancing across Europe to the right of this image. Let's talk through those results and what they mean with Adam Parsons and Siobhan Robbins, who joins us from Berlin. Thank you very much both for joining us here on the programme. Adam, I'm going to come to you first because we're seeing some very early, well, the first opinion poll that's just been published, which shows that the far-right National Rally was forecast to sort of win the snap election in France, but would fall short of an absolute majority. I mean, this gamble that Emmanuel Macron has taken, it's such a huge risk.
It's a massive risk, and there's lots of people who think that it's sort of slightly inexplicable, that it was an impulsive decision. Perhaps that's exactly what you would expect from Emmanuel Macron, very instinctive politician. But it comes off the back of having an absolute shocker in the European elections. The Rassemblement National, National Rally, the party of Jordan Bardella, Marine Le Pen, picking up 31.4% of the vote, more than double the 14.6% that went to Mr. Macron's Renaissance Party. In other words, they wiped him absolutely off the floor. So he had to react to that. So his supporters say, Gérald Darmanin, one of his closest allies, Interior Minister, saying that he was completely full square behind President Macron's decision. But it is a big gamble, because if you look at those projections, Yalda, that you mentioned, they have got the extrapolation suggesting that the RM would pick up an enormous, maybe 250 seats, and that Mr. Macron's party would get far, far fewer. It wouldn't be an absolute majority, but if they could form some kind of coalition, then that would mean the right would be in control of the parliament.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just bringing in Siobhan, because, of course, we're seeing that kind of swing in Germany as well, aren't we, Siobhan? I mean, the AfD in Germany have taken such an extreme approach that even Marine Le Pen has distanced herself from them and sort of said, you know, they've gone too far.
Yes, this hasn't been an easy run-up to the election for the AfD. There were a number of scandals. For example, the lead candidate actually had to step back from campaigning after he said in an interview that the Nazi SS weren't all criminals. His aide is being investigated for allegedly spying for China. And so some are questioning whether the AfD could actually do that. But a number of things sort of played in their favour. One of them was the very tragic killing of a police officer just over a week ago by a failed asylum seeker, and that allowed the AfD to really re-grab control of the migration debate. The other thing that really helped them actually was young people, because for the first time this year, 16-year-olds were allowed to vote. And if you look at the numbers, it's 16 to 24-year-olds where they've really had a big push. And one of the reasons for that is because they were really smart about the way they did their social media campaigning. So they pushed their messages, whether it be about the war in Ukraine or migration or the cost of living, very clearly on TikTok. So there was one, for example, about the war in Ukraine, where one of the candidates said, "It's not our war. Zelensky's not your president. Do you want to end up paying for this? Are you worried Germany's going to get brought into it?" And that was very clear for young people. And it's not clear if they just weren't aware of the scandals or didn't care about them, but they backed the AFD in big numbers.
Yeah, I mean, Siobhan, just on that point, you've talked about the scandals. What is it about the AFD, their appeal, that's drawn so many people to them, despite the scandals that you're talking about?
I think one of the main things is that clear messaging, as I was saying. Young people really back them. Also, things that we've seen that have fed into support for the far right across Europe. So concerns about the cost of living, concerns about migration, people really feeling that the governing coalition isn't working for them, that they aren't listening. And there's also been quite a lot of fraction within that governing coalition. So I think people have questioned whether they are really the people for them, and then backed the AFD. And don't forget that often the EU election is seen as a protest. It's seen as sending a message to your domestic government. So it could be that some people thought, I've had enough of the way I'm seeing Olaf Scholz dealing with this issue, so I'm going to back the AFD to send them a message.
And Adam, I guess we're seeing this right across Europe, aren't we? And frankly, we're seeing it on both sides of the Atlantic. But if we're looking at the situation in Europe, it is that sort of concern right across the board. They feel, voters feel, the public feel that their concerns are not being heard. And it's the messaging that the far-right groups are sending, which is clearly working or touching some kind of nerve.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that a lot of these parties, whether they would call themselves far-right parties or right-wing parties or national conservatives, the bottom line is that many of them say that governments aren't listening to you. Institutions like the EU aren't listening. The media aren't listening. They are saying that we, these kind of anti-establishment groups, are the people who understand. I think that, here in France, is probably what the RN have done very, very well, not least because they've got these two figureheads. You've got Marine Le Pen, who has been around the block many times, failed runs for the presidency, a very significant figure in far-right politics who's tried so hard to detoxify the party she inherited from her father, and Jordan Bardella, this 28-year-old who has an enormous social media following, came from a pretty tough Paris suburb, and has appealed to working class voters and has done very well at that. Just look at the results that they've picked up here. And that is a trend across Europe of these anti-establishment. Now, look at not just political parties, look at the farmers' protests, how much traction that they gained away from farmers. Look at the Dutch election, the success of Geert Wilders. You've been hearing from Siobhan, of course, about the growth of the AFD. It is patchy, we should say. This is not the entirety of Europe. If you strip out France and Germany, that's a big if to do, then actually, if you look at the results with those two big countries taken out, the far-right parties haven't actually made significant progress at all. But you can't strip out France and Germany. That is the motor of Europe. And what is happening in those two countries, of course, has an enormous impact. And I would say, I think there is a huge influence from social media, and also, got to be honest, a big influence from Donald Trump's Make America Great Again. You hear that being repeated by many, many anti-establishment politicians now in their own form of mantra.
Yeah, indeed. And we've heard that kind of mantra in their own form for many years now. And I guess, Siobhan, we're just talking to Adam there about the risk that Emmanuel Macron has taken by calling the snap election. Are we likely to see that kind of thing in other parts of Europe now?
Well, if we look at Germany, certainly the Chancellor is under pressure. The CDU, which actually got the most votes, is calling for him to call a snap election. The AFD as well, saying he should follow Macron's lead. We aren't seeing any indication of that. And it was interesting when the figures first came out last night, those first exit polls. Olaf Scholz was at the Social Democrats' headquarters. He seemed to just ignore them, walk around as if nothing had happened. Then earlier today, his spokesperson came out and said that there wouldn't be a snap election. And then he later addressed the issue, saying we can't go back to business as usual and that we can't ignore the rise of the far right. And he's right, because even if there isn't an election today or tomorrow or next month, there is an election coming. An election will have to be called here by next autumn. And so they're going to have to work really, really hard to really try and claw back that support from the AFD.
Siobhan, Adam, really fascinating, and I imagine we'll continue this conversation in the months and weeks to come. Thank you so much. And we will also be talking about this very issue with author Naomi Klein a little later in the programme about what's going on here in Europe and, of course, in the United States. Now, let's go to the United States because jurors have tonight begun deliberating in the gun trial of President Biden's son, Hunter. The case centres around a gun Hunter Biden purchased when prosecutors say he was in the grip of a crack cocaine addiction. Well, let's bring in our Mark Stone, who joins me live from Delaware. Mark, bring us up to date because, of course, the legal fate of Hunter Biden now is in the hands of a 12-member jury.
Yes, 6 men and 6 women, 6 ordinary Americans from here in Delaware who for the past just over a week have been listening to the most extraordinary evidence, details of one family's tragedy, one family's struggles, and at the heart of it, the allegation that the most troubled member of that family, Hunter, had lied on a form to obtain a weapon, had told had said on that form that he was not addicted to drugs when he bought the weapon, when in fact he was. That is the prosecution case, that he lied on a gun form in a successful attempt as it was to obtain a handgun. But over the course of the past week or so, we've got a glimpse of a web of relationships within a family, the first family, of the difficulties that one member of that family, in fact 2 members of that family, had with addiction. And it has really exposed the tragedy of the Biden family going back many, many years. Hunter Biden is President Biden's second son. You'll know that President Biden's elder son, Beau Biden, died of cancer back in 2015. And that really was, I guess, one moment of inflection in this case, because when when Beau died, Hunter's wife, Hallie, began a relationship with Hunter. And through the course of that relationship, they both were addicted to drugs. And a gun was bought, and the form, allegedly, there was the lie on that form. And that is the centre of this case. And through the case, the prosecution has revealed so many text messages that Hunter sent both to Hallie, his brother's widow, but also to drug dealers. Now, these text messages were sent around about the time when he claimed on the form that he was not addicted to drugs. And so these are a key central part of the evidence against Hunter Biden. The jury has now been sent out to deliberate. They've been out around about 3/4 of an hour. The trial is due to conclude for the day, probably going on previous days, in about 15 minutes. So it may well continue tomorrow. But this is a pivotal case. It's a very personal one for President Biden. Of course, his wife, the First Lady, Hunter's stepmother, has been in court pretty much every day. She even came back from France to attend the court a couple of days ago. So a very personal case, but one, of course, in the climate that is politics here in America, a deeply political case as well.
Yeah, and as you say, I mean, you touched there on the tragedy of the Biden family. Of course, Hunter's mother died when he was very young. You know, it is a story that we've heard that has really surrounded Joe Biden's entire life and political life. And so for it to come to this, if he is found guilty, he will be the first son of a president to be sort of a sitting president that's convicted in a federal court.
And because of that, I think the stakes are so high for the Biden family, for President Biden, personally for him. This would be a body blow if he was found guilty. Politically, you can imagine that the rhetoric from the right of politics here will go into overdrive if it already isn't already. Because Hunter has been the bogeyman, really, for the right of politics. He's been at the centre of a web of scandal and controversy and conspiracy that Donald Trump and many on the right have continued to push.
Okay, Mark, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there from Delaware. And I was saying a little earlier that we will be speaking to Naomi Klein, and we will be doing that after the break. We'll be speaking more about the success of anti-establishment figures in global politics. As I said, I'll be speaking to that author about the rise of the right across Europe and the United States. Plus, what Prince William had to say to the England team before they jetted off for the Euros.
Westminster may seem a long way from Grimsby and Cleethorpes, but not for long. With a general election around the corner, we're bringing you Sunak versus Starmer live from Grimsby. Putting their cases forward to you and facing questions from a live audience. Who will convince you to give them the keys to this place? The battle for number 10. Get the full story first on Sky News.
Welcome back to the programme. Now, in the last hour, the UN Security Council has passed a resolution backing President Joe Biden's ceasefire proposal for Gaza. Well, let's get the very latest with our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. And Ali, just bring us up to date on this vote, because I do recall on the 25th of March or something, there was a ceasefire deal that went into the Security Council. It was voted for, and then nothing happened. I feel like we've been here before.
Yeah, this is not the first UN Security Council resolution that's been passed during the last 8 months of Israel's war with Hamas. I think it's the third. What this one is effectively a vote on the proposal, the ceasefire and hostage release proposal that was laid down by President Biden about 10 days ago now from the White House, something that he said that the Israelis supported, a three-stage plan. The first stage would see an immediate ceasefire, the partial withdrawal within Gaza of some Israeli forces, and in return, the release of some of the hostages, women, children, the elderly. During the first phase, you would then negotiate a second phase, and the second phase would be a permanent ceasefire and the full withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. And then the third phase would be the reconstruction phase in Gaza. Now, since Biden gave that speech in the White House, we haven't had any formal acceptance or rejection of it from Hamas. They've pretty much gone quite quiet, which does not look good. But the UN Security Council has now voted tonight on it. 14 votes in favour, including Britain, France and the United States. It was the US who proposed it. One abstention, Russia, but no vetoes. So it has passed. So the question is what difference will it make? What now? What are the consequences? Well, there won't really be any consequence in the short term. And the reason being, and back to what I was saying about Hamas, is that Hamas have not yet given their formal response to it. And for any ceasefire to work, for any hostage deal to work, it obviously takes both sides to agree to it. The Israelis obviously would have to put it through their various cabinet levels, but assuming that Benjamin Netanyahu could get it past the far right in his cabinet, Israel would pass it, but Hamas would have to agree it as well, and they just haven't done so, so it is not going anywhere. The one piece that I would pull out of what they voted on tonight that I think is quite significant in the sort of the medium to long term, and it says that the UN rejects any attempts to change the territory of Gaza. And I think what that alludes to is Israel's attempts to try and build some sort of buffer zone, quite a sort of large buffer zone along the Gaza border, and perhaps even cut it in two. And basically the UN is saying it would reject any attempt by Israel to do that.
Ali, thank you so much. Now, as the UN votes, America's top diplomat is back in the Middle East trying to build consensus around a ceasefire deal. But after this weekend's hostage rescue, which came at the cost of the lives of 274 Palestinians, how much hope is there on Antony Blinken securing a breakthrough? Now, the dramatic rescue operation was carried out by the Israeli Defense Forces over the weekend in central Gaza. 4 of the hostages were recovered from Nusayrat and helicoptered back to Israel after heavy, intense gunfire in the bustling market streets. Scenes of celebration and relief followed in Israel. 4 families reunited with their loved ones. They'd been in Hamas captivity for 246 days. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu lauded the mission a great military success. But for Palestinians caught up in the conflict, it brought even more suffering. The Gaza health officials say many of those killed were women and children.
They struck houses with rockets. People's bodies were on the streets. I lost my family. 14 were killed. He's the only one that survived, he and his mother. The rest are gone.
There were clashes, then another bomb, then an F-16. Something unexpected. More than what you can imagine.
They shot me in the shoulder here and they shot me in the stomach, and the bullet went out from my back. My younger brother was 12 years old and in the 6th grade. The boy has nothing to do with any of this, but they shot him in the stomach.
Well, joining me now is David Tzur, a former commander of the Yamam Unit that carried out this weekend's raid in Gaza. Thank you so much, David, for joining us here on the programme. I just want to begin by asking, how is success measured? We've just heard a series of voices from Gaza. We saw a woman, a small baby, the only survivor of the baby's family is the child itself. And like that, so many other stories, over 200 Palestinians killed as a result of this rescue operation.
Well, good evening. Nobody can stay apathic to those kind of stories and pictures, of course. If you're asking me what is success, for us the success is to bring back the hostages back home, either by diplomatic, political solution, this kind of what you discussed just before, the UN resolution. Me personally, even the government maybe think differently. We think this kind of resolution can solve the problem for everyone. In this case, we had to execute a tactical operation, which unfortunately there is a collateral damage, which we are executing this kind of a hostage rescue in a very highly popular area.
I guess the question, David, is 274 people, many of them women and children, aren't just collateral damage, though, are they? I mean, this is a rescue operation that caused high levels of civilian casualties. And given, I mean, you've just said yourself, there are other ways in which the hostages can be released through this UN resolution, through ceasefire deals that are on the table and being discussed at present. So given that Israeli intelligence knew that these hostages were there and alive, did it need to end with over 250 Palestinians dead?
No, the timeline is different. Those hostages are being held there more than 8 months in a hell. Some of them raped, some of them beaten to death, and some of them are alive. And we have
some of them killed by the IDF. I mean, just in December, three Israeli hostages waving a white flag were killed by the IDF. In fact, there are Israeli hostages that have been released that have said to Haaretz that our greatest fear was the IDF bombing the buildings we were in.
Yeah, but you don't want us just to stay and watch how they are being held there till Hamas will decide either is accepting any kind of deal or not. We have to take measures, and the measures we took is rescuing hostages. The first stage, we didn't hit any innocent person besides of those who are holding. We did a very, very tactical and accurate operation. The last step, when we were rescuing them outside from the buildings, from that moment, it started, think about you are in the middle of Somalia, Black Hawk Down, and you are surrounded by hundreds of militants running.
But I wonder if U.S. operations, you know, their special operations would have approved a mission like this that would have resulted in the deaths of hundreds of civilians, including women and children.
Yeah, but
I mean, the images that the world is seeing is of that.
Yeah, but ask yourself, how come they are holding those hostages inside a very populated area, inside the market, and with the civilians surrounding them? They're using cynically the civilian as the shields, and we can't accept that those hostages were being held there until the Hamas will decide whether he is accepting or not accepting the diplomatic deal.
We also have heard from
I wish
Prime Minister.
I wish we could sign on a diplomatic way to bring all of them home, because this is the most safely way to bring them back home. But the Hamas mainly is not accepting any kind of deal. We can't accept
neither is Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his party. And of course, we saw now as a result, Benny Gantz has resigned, saying that he, hasn't had any clarity on the day after plan. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. But David Tzur, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up, England's form's been a little off ahead of the Euros. So, could a team talk from Prince William help improve morale? Welcome back to the programme. Both England and Scotland have flown out to Germany ahead of their opening games at football's European Championships. England's build-up hasn't exactly gone to plan, with a 1-0 defeat to Iceland in their final warm-up game. Today, they received a send-off from Prince William, who came with some words of encouragement and advice. Our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills, has the story.
When you're a big football fan, but also president of the FA, there are certain perks. Prince William allowed to drop in on the England team.
I was on the school run this morning with the children, and I said, what should I say to the England team when I see them today? And the best bit of advice I got to ask you was to eat twice the amount you normally would eat. So I then had visions of all of you running around like massive great tummies and loads of stitches on the pitch. So I think maybe take my youngest kind of advice with a pinch of salt. I just want you guys to know how much it means to everyone back here that you go out there, give it your all, play for the shirt, play for each other, and play for the country.
Next, time to hand out the shirts. Manager Gareth Southgate had a reminder of what it really means.
Whilst this is our moment, we are in a line of history here. The shirt and the badge is bigger than us.
First up, the man who'll again be leading the team. Outside, Jill Scott was there, part of the women's team who won the Euros in 2022, which does add to the pressure on the men after they lost on penalties the year before. As with every tournament, they know they are setting an example. Children playing at St George's Park, excited to see them and able to give them one final grilling.
Do you ever get nervous before a match?
Of course. I think nerves are really important. I think it means that you care about it. So, whenever I get nervous about a match, I just think to enjoy it.
Harry Kane's celebration, didn't you?
Everything, everywhere.
Yeah. Prince William, like the rest of them, hoping there will be a bit more to celebrate after they lost to Iceland on Friday.
We know how much it means to the country, to the fans, and that's everyone from the royal family to the local shop worker. The whole nation comes together at this moment, and we feel a responsibility to try and make them proud.
Royal visit over and the buses were waiting. The manager has faced criticism for the players who haven't made the squad. Now, as they get on that plane to Germany, we'll see if his risks have paid off, as a certain royal fan, his family and the country expects. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
And staying with football, I just want to bring you an update on a story we covered a few months ago. Do you remember these images? Have a look. They're coming up right now. Yep, that was Real Madrid striker Vinicius Jr. in tears at a news conference after he was repeatedly targeted by fans. 16 incidents of racist abuse directed at him have been reported to Spanish prosecutors by La Liga in the last 2 seasons. Well, let's go straight to our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, who joins me now. And Rob, La Liga has sort of hailed some news that's just come out of Spain today.
Yes, there's previously been many questions about Spain's real commitment to eradicating racism, but the League, along with Real Madrid and Vinicius Jr., have pursued a criminal prosecution, and today a court in Valencia handing down 8-month sentences to 3 Valencia fans who racially abused Vinicius in a game in May 2023. It's taken a long time for this to come to court, but the fact it has come to court is something that has never happened before, with fans being prosecuted for racist abuse at a Spanish game. Now, these 3 fans are unlikely to serve any jail time unless there are repeat offences, but they will be banned from any football matches for the next 2 years. And the Spanish League believes this is a significant moment, showing there is consequence for players being racially abused in stadiums, which is something Vinicius has suffered repeatedly. So much so at that press conference recently, saying it makes it hard for him to even enjoy playing football anymore. But the 23-year-old Brazilian tonight has welcomed this verdict in a statement. He says, "Many asked me to ignore it. Others said that my fight was in vain and that I should just play football. But as I've always said, I'm not a victim of racism. I am the tormentor of racists. This first criminal conviction in Spanish history is not for me. It's for all black people. Let the other racists be afraid, ashamed, and hide in the shadows. Otherwise, I'll be here to collect." Thank you to La Liga and Real Madrid for helping to bring about this historic condemnation. There's more to come. Well, there is a hope from FIFA that other countries do emulate Spain in ensuring that racist abuse in football stadiums and in wider society is a criminal offence. And for Vinicius, this has been yet another successful season on the pitch, one of the stars of the game. He's won the Spanish League and the Champions League, scoring the final here at Wembley for Real Madrid. So he wants to try and ensure that his football is free of abuse and he can continue starring without being facing racism in his workplace.
Rob, thank you so much for that update. Now, this is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up, what's behind the rise of the right across Europe? I'll talk to author Naomi Klein about why the pendulum is swinging away from the left. Welcome back to the programme. Now, we started the show talking about those European elections, far-right parties surging in places like Germany and France. So what's driving their popularity? Well, today I sat down with the acclaimed author, Naomi Klein. She told me the trend is part of a wider problem of global leaders misunderstanding voters and leaving a void for populist leaders to exploit. They do so by tapping into people's fears, and whether they get the facts right doesn't really matter. It's all about emotion. So how should the likes of Emmanuel Macron respond? Well, in Klein's view, it's not by calling a snap election. Here's her take.
I'm worried. I'm worried by the snap election in France because I among other things, I think that Macron has gone back to the fear well of, we are not them, maybe one too many times. And I don't think it's going to work as well this time. That's my concern. A lot of what I've been writing about and researching is how when you have a sort of weak centrist political power base that is not meeting people's urgent economic and social needs, the right becomes a lot more attractive, and especially when you have center left and center right parties that are adopting a lot of the policies of the far right, and then the distinctions get a lot blurrier, and it's harder to scare people and say, well, this will be the end of the world if France votes for Le Pen, and I do think it is incredibly alarming.
What do you think it is about the messaging of the far right? You say that the centrist parties don't meet the needs of the people. What is it that they're sort of selling to people that makes them feel that their needs might be met if they vote this way?
Well, I think what they're capturing is a genuine feeling of brokenness, that the system is broken, that it's failing. They're also capturing a sense that the system is rigged against you, which is actually true. I mean, we have an economic system that is serving elites, and the cost of living, as we know, is soaring. A lot of things really are breaking, including our planetary systems. So when you have center-right and center-left parties sort of sending this message of, no, things are basically okay, maybe we'll do a little bit of technocratic tweaking, that doesn't resonate with people's lived experience of unraveling, of genuine difficulty. So, one of the things that I write about is how they get the facts wrong, but the feelings right. And the feeling that I think that they're tapping into is a deep unfairness of, okay, maybe people are scheming in rooms and that you're not in. And they spin it into conspiracy theories, and they also scapegoat very well, but it's the feeling that they're getting right that centrist parties are really missing with this sort of reassuring message.
Let's talk about the situation in the United States, because you've talked about people's needs, them voting in a certain way here in Europe because they feel like their needs aren't met. Yeah. We're seeing similar things, and we continue to see similar things in the United States. Just tell me about...
Well, this is part of what I worry about with this sort of, looking at Macron, his fear message of, okay, we need a snap election because we can't, let this happen. The right is so scary. I think what's happened with the way in which the newish right is rebranding is they're kind of have this message of like, we're your bully, we're your bad guy. Things are so bad that don't you want a bad guy on your side? And Trump does that very, very well, as you know. He's really embracing his outlaw image. He goes straight from the conviction to, a huge stadium, mixed martial arts stadium, where he's greeted as a kind of a mob boss, really. Like, people are really liking the idea that he breaks the rules, that he is a little bit scary. And that is one way of responding to your own feelings of insecurity, is like, just get a tough guy on your side. That's mob politics. So I think the right is tapping into this, unfortunately, better than, if someone like Biden, who keeps being like, haven't you seen the latest economic numbers? Things are great. And people are going, well, they don't feel great.
And you've been extremely vocal on this situation, especially the war in Gaza. Most recently, about a month ago, you gave a speech that went viral during Seder, and you talked about a need for an exodus of Zionism. That you had a lot of people supporting you. You had people who were also saying, well, Zionism to me means the existence of the state of Israel. How do you respond and deal with that because of your own personal heritage as well?
Yeah, the speech was during Passover, the second night of Passover, and it was an event organized by a very large Jewish and growing Jewish peace organization, Jewish Voice for Peace in the United States, that's been calling for a ceasefire for a long time, and is really organizing a new generation, a generational shift that is what I was talking about in that speech, which is an exodus from Zionism. It's a generation that is saying that their Jewishness needs to be disentangled from the actions of an ethno-state, the actions of a state that has defined Jewish identity and Jewish safety as a project of maintaining a Jewish demographic majority at all costs, which necessarily sees Palestinians as a demographic threat, therefore lesser human beings, which needs to be understood if we try to understand, well, how can this state that claims to be so moral justify the targeting of civilians on the scale that we're seeing, justify the killing of children, the maiming? It's only within this context of a logic that sees Palestinians as less than human or lesser human, and sees this goal of maintaining a Jewish demographic majority as the essence of Jewish safety. And so there is an exodus that is going on. So during Passover, it seemed like the right time to say it, of many of us saying, this is not our Judaism. It betrays the values that we believe in, that connects us to Judaism. I'm not saying this is all Jews who believe this. It's still a minority, but it really is a huge shift that's happening.
And just finally, I know you said that this election is a sort of really difficult election and choices, but what do you think is going to happen?
In the United States? I'm not in the. I don't progress. I don't predict, honestly. I would just, like I said, it's the hardest election of my lifetime. I personally don't feel comfortable telling people that they shouldn't vote according to their conscience when their conscience is screaming at them that this is the worst thing that they have ever seen in their lives in Gaza. But that said, I genuinely believe that Trump would be much worse. I believe that we're tipping into something extremely dangerous, but I don't think we have any good choices on the ballot right now.
That was Naomi Klein there. Well, that's all for the programme tonight. News at 10 is next with all the latest on the general election campaign. We're back tomorrow night at 9. Good night.